So welcome back everyone. Let us continue our discussion of NMR instrumentation where we had already discussed the magnet part. So let us now start with the transmitter section. So job of transmitter section is to generate RF pulses, radio frequency pulses, which are used to carry out transition, right? To carry out transition between Zeeman levels. Or in other words, it is transmitter section actually generates the B1 field, which rotates the magnetization about itself to bring it down to transverse plane or other uh, uh, away from the thermal equilibrium position, right? To carry out transitions between Zeeman levels. So it starts with RF synthesizer. So let me just write down this as a RF synthesizer. So what does synthesizer does? So it produces an oscillating electric current. Oscillating electric current or electric signal, we should rather say, instead of current. The thing is with a well-defined frequency. Right? So this frequency is basically called as omega ref, or in other words it is also called as spectrometer reference frequency, which has a functional form of cos omega ref t, right? Now this RF wave is then sent to phase shifter circuit. So I'm not going into details of what all these circuits, how these circuits are designed. That is beyond the scope of this course. So basically, if you really want to understand this, then you'll have to go to a electronics class and not NMR class. So phase shifter circuit. So its job is to impart phase to this wave, and functionally what you get is omega ref t plus phi t. So remember that every B1 field is not necessarily along x or y axis, but it may be along any random side in the transverse plane. So that is done by phase shifter circuit. So you have phi t. So you can control using phase shifter circuit what should be the phase of the B1 field, whether it has to be along x-axis or y-axis. Accordingly, the value of phi is changed by phase shifter circuit. Okay, so followed by this, the radio wave is then sent to pulse gate. Pulse gate is a gating mechanism where it uh, allows only a region of the pulse to pass through, and rest of the wave is discarded, and thus it generates, instead of a RF wave, it generates a RF pulse. So pictorially, if you want to understand what happens, if you have a RF wave, it looks like this. Let's say it's a cosine wave. Of omega RF frequency. Then the gating signal or the gate signal, let's say, is like this. Okay, it's a step function with up step and down step, and if you multiply these two, so you will only get signal. So if you see the gate output, it looks something like this. So instead of a continuous wave, this actually becomes a RF radio frequency pulse, right? This pulse is of a particular duration, let's say tau p duration, that gives a desired flip angle. So if you remember that alpha flip angle, so which depends on the duration of the pulse, so that's how the duration of the pulse is decided. So you can choose your gating signal. If you want a 30-degree pulse, so you will have a shorter gate. If you have a 180-degree pulse, you will have a longer gate. If you have a 90-degree pulse, you have this sort of a gate, right? So basically this is done to give the duration, desired duration, to create a RF pulse from RF wave, okay, so that we can have a particular flip angle. Okay, now the RF that is generated from this gate output, it must have enough power, because it has to travel all the way from transmitter to probe. We will see what a probe is. So that means the power of the pulse has to be sufficient enough to travel a certain length of the electronics, right? So what I'm saying is that RF that is generated should have enough power for transmission to the probe. We will come to what probe is a little later. So thus this RF pulse is sent to amplifier. So here after going to amplifier, so amplifier output is high power RF pulse. So it doesn't change the frequency, it just changes the amplitude. So high power RF pulse. Okay, all right. So from amplifier, high power RF pulse then is supplied to duplexer. What is duplexer? It's a high acting switch. I'll tell you in a minute why it is used. So from duplexer, the pulse goes to probe. Okay. So probe has a RF coil. Probe has a coil from which it is transmitted. The RF pulse is transmitted to the sample. Now when the signal is generated from sample, it goes back to the probe. Same coil is received. The sample generates the signal. When magnetization relaxes, it generates current in this probe coil, and that current is sent back. Now instead of going back to transmitter section, the duplexer job is to divert the signal to receiver section. Okay. So it is like a switch. When duplexer is turned on in one particular situation, then this circuit is on. Okay, and when it is relaxing, when the signal is being generated, then this circuit is on. Okay, so that is the job of the duplexer, that it has to turn on at the right point of time. When RF pulse is being sent, it should allow RF pulse to send to sample, and when sample is generating signal, it should allow that signal to go to receiver section. Okay, so this is duplexer is nothing but a fast acting switch. So switching mechanism. Okay, so now let us look at what is probe. Okay, another important part of the spectrometer. So let us draw a basic design of probe, something like this. So whenever I'm drawing a rectangle, I mean I'm drawing a vertical cross section uh, of a right circular cylinder. So from top it looks like this. Okay, so I'm drawing the vertical, I'm just looking at it from this side. So this will be a, from top it looks like this. Okay, so inside this there is a coil. So this whole assembly, this whole thing actually sits inside the magnet like this. If this is your magnet, this is my probe. So this probe assembly sits in this magnet from bottom in the bore. Remember that there was a bore which was empty part of the magnet. This is the bore, and inside the bore the probe is sitting. Okay, so let me just write, this is the bore, which is the empty part of the magnet. And if you now you can appreciate that B0 is in the direction, is in the Z0 direction, right? Because now there is a coil which is surrounding this, is coming like this, the superconducting coil, right? Okay, now inside this there is another coil which is probe coil, which has a geometry something like this. Again, this is only for drawing purposes. This is not the exact architecture of the coil. It depends on many other things, but this is only for understanding purposes. So this is basically an inductor. Then you have a variable capacitor. Variable capacitor is shown with an arrow with two parallel bars, and then there is another variable capacitor here, and this goes to the duplexer. Okay, so what is the job of the probe? First of all, it helps to place the sample in the region of homogeneous magnetic field. So where is the sample being placed here? So sample is going to be placed, let me draw it with a different color. Sample is going to be placed here. Okay, with the help of something called as spinner. Let me also draw spinner, maybe in another color. So spinner, it actually looks like this. And then the sample tube goes on the top through this spinner, something like this, and then this is filled with the sample over here, right? So if this is 7 inches long, you can imagine the length of this will be roughly 3 to 4 inches or something, right? And from the top, if you see, this is again a circular thing with a hole in the center, right, through which this tube fits nicely, snugly it fits into the hole, and it goes like this, right? And there are certain colors marked over here. Okay, now this spinner with the sample goes inside and sits inside the probe. How do you insert? So the first question should come that we have a big magnet around 6 feet long. In the center of that cavity of the magnet, or the bore of the magnet, this probe is sitting, and inside the probe sample goes and sits, right? Now sample tube is made of glass. If you throw sample like this, there is no guarantee that it will go sit straight into this cavity, and because it will be a free fall, so this will shatter the tube inside, right? So what they do is they supply air current, air through this there is a port through which air is supplied, and if you give a command that start supplying air, then the air pressure increases and it lifts the sample up if already there is a sample. And if there is no sample, still you can supply air. And if there is air pressure is high here, and if you drop sample, the sample will actually float on air, right? So there is this cavity through which the sample will slowly come down when the air pressure is gradually decreased. Okay, so you first give a command to eject the sample, so that there is a high pressure air is floating inside. Then you throw sample from the top. You literally just drop it from the top, and the sample will keep on floating on air. The moment you say inject sample, then the air pressure will gradually remove, and it will slowly bring the sample down, and it will slowly shift inside. So that is the job of the probe, that it will place the sample inside the region of the homogeneous magnetic field. Remember that you have a probe, you have a superconducting coil which is also surrounding this, and that coil will give you a homogeneous magnetic field where the sample is centered to. Okay, so the sample is placed inside a highly homogeneous magnetic field. Okay, now second job is to generate so this is a RF circuit. So RF circuit will generate the or will irradiate the sample with RF pulse. Okay, so RF pulse is sent from transmitter section via duplexer to this coil, and it will generate a B1 field in the perpendicular direction to B0, right? So B1 we have in perpendicular direction to B0, right? Okay, so the same coil is then used to detect the relaxing magnetization. So when the magnetization is going back to z-axis or going back to thermal equilibrium, it will generate current in this coil, and that current is then passed through duplexer to receiver, right? So that we have already seen. Now, in addition to this coil, which is the inductor coil, there are two capacitor. One of the capacitor is called as tuning capacitor. Other is called as the matching capacitor, CM and CT, and this can be labeled as L, inductor, right? It's nothing but a solenoid. Now, job of tuning capacitor is to couple the transmitter circuit efficiently with the probe circuit. So that means all the power that is coming from transmitter has to efficiently be transferred to this LC circuit, right? So that is the job of matching capacitor. So what you do is, when you insert a sample inside, so you actually match, so you can change the capacitance so as to efficiently transfer all the RF pulses into this. So this is done manually, or in modern spectrometers it is done by press of a button that you optimize the CM value. Okay, this is done for every sample, so this changes with every sample again. Now job of the tuning capacitor is to enhance current in the coil by minimizing impedance. Okay, so what is impedance? Impedance, if you remember, Z is equal to R square plus XL minus XC whole square, right? So where so you have inductive, I forgot the term, what do you call as XL and XC? I think it is inductance something. I'll come back to it in the comments. So this is a resistance equivalent of the inductor, and resistance equivalent of, I forgot the term. So this is the resistance of the whole circuit, followed by resistance equivalent of the inductor coil, resistance equivalent of the capacitor, and this whole square will give you the impedance. So you want to minimize the impedance so that the current can be maximized. So if you enhance current, then you will make this LC circuit more efficient. So what you mean by that is, so you have omega, the frequency which is generated by this inductor coil is equal to 1 over square root of inductance into capacitance. Okay. Now this frequency should match with omega, should be equal to omega ref, and because your sample, once you place the sample inside, again there is, the sample has some magnetic susceptibility, so it will perturb a little bit the overall field over here, and that's why you have this CT which can be perturbed, so that your overall frequency which is being transmitted out, or which is being the sample which is being irradiated to the sample, is equal to the frequency which is actually generated by the transmitter section of the probe. So this is something like a radio where you tune your receiver circuit to listen to a given frequency corresponding to, let's say, if you want to listen to Red FM, you turn the knob, right? If you want to listen to Radio City, you again turn the knob. So by turning the knob, what you are doing is you are changing the capacitance of the circuit, so that your receiver actually receives the signal corresponding to that particular frequency. Okay, so like a radio station is throwing all sorts of frequencies, and you want to listen to a particular frequency, you tune your radio to that particular frequency, so only 98.3 is received, or only 91 FM is received, right? And so on and so forth. So so the mechanism is essentially very similar to radio tuning. So now when magnetization is relaxing, oscillating magnetic field drives electrical current, electrical oscillations in the tuned circuit. The capacitor coil then acts, capacitor and this inductor coil acts together to accumulate the energy of the weak NMR signal. So NMR signal is very, very weak. So all the energy of that weak NMR signal is stored in the capacitor, and then basically it is transferred to duplexer, then to receiver, right? So electrical properties of the LC circuit, as I've just mentioned, are affected by the nature of the sample, and thus it is necessary to adjust the values of CM and CT every time the sample is changed, and this process is called as tuning the probe. So probe has to be tuned every time you change the sample, okay, because of different ions which are present and all. Okay, so this particular diagram is for a single channel probe. So single channel probe means it generates only one frequency at a given time. Now there can be broadband probes where a same probe coil can actually tune different range of frequencies. For example, if you, let's say today you want to analyze proton, so you will tune it to proton, similar to like you tune your radio to Red FM. Then next day you want to analyze C13, you want to record C13 NMR spectrum. So you can tune the same probe to C13 signal, to C13 frequency, right? So the coil architecture, the capacitor architecture, everything has to be different. Everything has to be adjustable so that you can tune this to a broad range of frequencies. Such probes are called as broadband probes. There are also fixed nuclei probe. So for example, if you want to record proton and carbon, so there would be another coil which is surrounding this coil. Let's draw it in different color. So you will have another similar circuit which is on top of this circuit. Okay, it will have its own matching capacitor and tuning capacitor, and it will also go to duplexer via transmitter. So if now you want a proton signal, it will go to this separate channel. If you want a C13 signal, it will go to a separate channel. Okay, so each coil or each LC circuit is called as a channel of that particular probe. So probes can have 4 channel probes, 5 channel probes, broadband probes, single channel probes, and so on and so forth, right? So also the these coils have to be nicely insulated from one another so that there is no short circuit happening between these. And of course the frequencies have to be different, so there is no interference between different frequencies. Then similarly we have one dedicated channel is present in all the probes, all commercial probes, which is the lock channel, because it has to detect the deuterium signal. Remember the field frequency lock mechanism, so which is detected by the deuterium. So the deuterium has a separate channel dedicated to itself, and the probe, the transmitter sends signal corresponding to excitation of deuterium, and that is done by a separate channel, right? So depending on how much your requirement is, you accordingly go for a probe. The broadband probes are less sensitive as compared to fixed nuclei probe, and so on and so forth, right? So that is all about probe. And also let us discuss, remember we were discussing during signal averaging, we were discussing that some of the noise which is generated by the thermal motion of electrons can also be reduced by efficient design of the probe, efficient design of the instrument, right? So let us look into that carefully. So you have signal to noise ratio. This is for a single scan. So let's draw proportionality sign rather. So this is given by various factors. First is the number of nuclei. More the number of nuclei, more is the signal to noise. If you have 100 nuclei, the signal to noise will be proportional to 100. If you have 200 nuclei, signal to noise will be doubled, right? Then it will be proportional to excitation nuclei. If the excitation is gamma of excitation nuclei, if the excitation is done on proton, there'll be gamma H here. The excitation is done on carbon, there'll be gamma C here, and so on and so forth. Then the detected nuclei raised to the power 3 by 2. Then it is also proportional to the applied magnetic field 3 by 2. So B0. So that's why if B0 is higher, you will get higher signal to noise, right? This we just discussed in the last class. Then there is also called as a filling factor K. So now if you see that there is a small distance between the probe coil and the sample, right? So how efficiently this RF pulse which is irradiated by this coil is reached to the sample depends on how tightly it is packed, right? So you want the maximum efficiency, maximally efficient transfer, and if the transfer is maximum, the signal to noise will be maximum, right? Because all the power is being transmitted, right? So now that is defined by this filling factor, how tightly it is packed, how tightly the coils are packed into this, and this is defined by the factor K, which is called as filling factor. Okay, now further is inversely proportional to square root of delta F, which is called as bandwidth. This we will see little later. What is bandwidth? It's similar to spectral width. If you have understood what spectral width is, then there are different temperature and resistance factors. This is temperature of the sample, resistance of the sample. So sample will have a certain amount of resistance because of various ions which are present in the coil, in the sample, and this will be the temperature of the sample, right? So which of course you don't have much control on temperature of the sample because of the nature of the sample. If your sample let's say if you want to decrease the sample temperature so that signal to noise can be improved, there are other phenomena which can happen in sample, like sample might denature or sample might go bad. So you don't want to perturb the sample temperature a lot, but of course resistance may or may not be perturbed by perturbing the amount of ions which are present in this sample. then followed by amplifier temperature, RC, that is the resistance of the coil and resistance of the sample, TC and RC. So this is temperature of the coil and resistance of the coil. So temperature of the coil, resistance, of course you can't really do much here, uh, 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 only if you decrease the temperature, the resistance is also decreased, and this can be done by dipping this whole coil in again low temperature by either liquid nitrogen. So these are called as nitrogen cooled probes, or by cooled helium gas, which is running at 20 Kelvin temperature. Okay, so now cooled helium gas is supplied to this part of the probe. Again, helium gas is not supplied to the temperature portion, only to the coil portion. Okay, so only to the coil is cooled, so that the thermal motion of electrons are reduced in the coil, and then the noise is reduced. If the noise is reduced, the signal to noise ratio improves, right? Similarly, the amplifier is also cooled. Amplifier coils are also cooled by using the similar helium gas running at 20 Kelvin, and that's how you efficiently decrease the noise and improve the signal to noise ratio, in addition to increasing the number of scans. You can play with all of this. Of course, this comes at a cost. Providing helium gas, compressed helium gas at 20 Kelvin temperature, it requires a lot of money. I mean, there is a dedicated instrument, which is called as cryo panel, which is nothing but a pump, something like a air conditioning unit, but working with helium gas at 20 Kelvin temperature. So job of cryo panel is to circulate this cooled helium gas. Helium gas is cooled by a compressor and is then pumped throughout this probe using a cryo panel. Okay, now and similarly the amplifiers are also cooled down by cryo panel. Okay, that is all. So these are all the factors of the instrument which affect the signal to noise ratio, in addition to scans. So if you want to include the scans also here, so you will have square root of n. So depending on number of scans, also you can improve the signal to noise, as we learned earlier, right? So that is all for the probe. Now let us look at the last section of the instrument, which is called as receiver section. So now let us see the fate of NMR signal that comes from LC circuit via duplexer. So right, so you have LC circuit which is sending NMR signal to duplexer. And from duplexer it goes to receiver. Now NMR signal must be fed into computer to carry out Fourier transformation, right? We need to Fourier transform this NMR signal to be able to see how the spectrum looks like, because we want to extract the information about the chemical shift and the relaxation rates, which is done by Fourier transformation, as we learned earlier, right? Now the signal which is generated here is in analog form. What is analog form? That is the signal is in continuous it's a continuous function in time, which needs to be digitized. By digitized, I mean that it needs to be converted into a series of zeros and ones. So for example, what we have is a signal like this, and this needs to be converted into a series of zeros and ones, right? So this whole thing is achieved by something called as analog to digital converter. ADC. Okay. Now the modern ADCs can only handle signals which are oscillating at a certain rate. The signal which is coming from LC circuit is actually fluctuating at omega naught, which is the Larmor precession frequency, which is running in megahertz. So this megahertz signal is too fast to be handled by ADC. So what is the solution here? So the solution here is that signal needs to be down converted in frequency. So what I mean is that if I reduce all the signals by same amount, that is I subtract some amount of frequency, then I can down convert this frequency. How do I achieve this? So let's say if receiver compares this signal with a reference frequency which is supplied by the RF synthesizer, right? So RF synthesizer was the one which is sending from transmitter section, which is sending its signal to phase shifter and amplifier and so on and so forth, right? So if that RF synthesizer supplies the same frequency to receiver, then receiver can subtract that frequency from this, right? So basically receiver combines the oscillating signal at omega 0 and subtracts the omega reference, that is the spectrometer reference frequency, to generate a new signal which is oscillating at a relative Larmor frequency, or known as offset, right? So if you remember, this is called as offset. If you remember our discussion of rotating frame, so this is equivalent to observing the signal in rotating frame. So we are not observing the actual Larmor precession as done in rotating frame approximation. We are actually subtracting the rotating frame frequency out of the Larmor precession of the signal and measuring only the offset, which is in few kilohertz, or which is in few hundreds of hertz to a few kilohertz max, right? Instead of running into megahertz range. So basically the oscillation frequency of this wave is reduced, which can now be handled by ADC by doing this rotating frame measurement, right? So this is equivalent to doing rotating frame. What we do is just subtract the frequency out of this. Now this is again, let's go back and see, compare this procedure with ordinary radio receiver. So if you see that the radio station actually sends the frequency waves, the modulated RF waves in very large frequencies, so which are traveling through space, but these frequencies at the radio receiver are down converted into a audible frequency range where they are transformed into mechanical oscillations to generate a sound, right? So exactly same thing is happening here. So we are also down converting this frequency omega naught into offset. Okay, so if my original signal, let's say my original signal FID as a function of time is composed of cos of omega naught, which is the Larmor frequency precession, into the relaxation component. So then the job of receiver is to down convert this signal into cos of offset t e to the power minus tr2. Okay, this is called as frequency conversion, down conversion actually, done by receiver. Okay, so also this receiver generates two outputs. One is from the same signal, it generates two outputs. Another is by changing the phase of the receiver. So you have sine component minus tr2. Okay, and now this is called as the real part of the signal, and this is called as the imaginary part of the signal, and the whole thing is actually the complex NMR signal. Okay, now the rest of the process is simple. So let's go back to the second page. Now this real signal in time and imaginary signal in time, which is coming from receiver, is then sent to two separate ADC units, or depending on yeah. So the complex NMR signal is then sent to ADC units to be converted into digitized signal. Which is then sent to computer for Fourier transformation. So here the Fourier transformation is done, and what you see is the spectrum. Okay, so so digitization process looks something like this. So you have a analog signal, ADC converts it into a series of dots, which can then be converted into some series of zeros and ones, right? So how frequently you sample this these dots? So for example, why do you not measure these dots close enough? So this depends on something called as dwell time, how fast you have to sample the FID. This is called as dwell time, which we will discuss in the later part of this course. Okay, so this is called as dwell time, the time delay between the two points which are digitized in FID. Okay. So now let us quickly summarize the instrumentation part. So let's start with let me go to this side so that I get more space. Okay, so let's start with computer. So user is entering all the commands through this computer. So from computer, what you do is you send your commands to Pulse programmer. That I want this pulses in for so and so duration and for so and so power. Now this Pulse programmer then is controlling RF synthesizer. So accordingly, the RF pulses are synthesized. No, RF is synthesized. The Pulse programmer also controls phase shifter. Okay, so the RF wave which is synthesized is sent to phase shifter. From phase shifter, it is sent to pulse gate. So now you have the pulse, RF pulse, and RF pulse is then amplified. So it has to be sent to amplifier. The amplified pulse is then sent to the duplexer. The duplexer then sends it to probe, which then sits inside the magnet. Right now, from probe, let me draw the circuit with another color. So now you have the signal which is sent back to duplexer, which is then sent to receiver. Now phase shifter sends omega reference to receiver also. So this is the same omega reference which is sent to pulse gate, and here you have omega naught, right? So the output of this is there are two outputs. One is the real part of the signal, which is a function of offset and time, and the imaginary part of the signal is also the function of offset and time. also the R2 actually, right? Okay. Now both of them are then fed to ADC and then to computer, right? The same computer, and then you get the NMR spectrum. So this is no way a comprehensive discussion on the NMR instrumentation, but we have I have tried to cover the important aspects of the NMR instrumentation which are required to create the Zeeman splitting and then to create a RF pulse followed by a detection and then the frequency down conversion, digitization of the signal followed by the Fourier transformation and then the NMR spectrum. So this is all for today, and I hope this discussion on instrumentation part clarified a lot of details, and that is all for today. Thank you.